And as soon as I walked out of there, I went in the bathroom and I threw up. And just laid on the floor for like 30 minutes. His mama came in there and cleaned me up. This is a 5.5-hour flight. Don't nobody say one word to me. Not one word. Just having conversations and doing all kinds of things.
Breaking news is shaking the hip-hop world. The FBI has decrypted secret drives seized from Diddy's personal stash. And inside those files, they uncovered a name no one ever expected: Snoop Dogg. Yes, the Dogfather himself, the man fans saw as harmless, funny, and family-friendly, is now tied to one of the darkest conspiracies in music history. These encrypted files reveal hidden payments, secret messages, and connections that link Snoop directly to Diddy's inner circle during the final days of Tupac Shakur. Could one of hip-hop's most beloved icons really have been hiding in plain sight this entire time? Stay tuned, because what I'm about to show you could rewrite everything you thought you knew. Hip-hop's foundation is trembling after a stunning revelation. Federal agents have finally broken into encrypted computer disks seized from Diddy's private collection, and what they uncovered is sending shockwaves far beyond the music scene. Investigators weren't sifting through casual emails or trivial receipts. Hidden deep within layers of protection was evidence that reaches further than Diddy himself. The files point directly toward an accomplice tied to the decades-old Shakur mystery, and the name is almost too surreal to process: Snoop Dogg. The Dogfather, the internet's lovable uncle, the man who turned his laid-back charm and kitchen cameos into cultural gold, is now under the microscope of federal authorities. Insiders suggest Snoop may already be preparing for a sudden exit, as investigators move closer to securing a warrant. If these allegations hold weight, the fallout could redefine scandal in hip-hop history, casting doubt on one of the most adored figures the genre has ever produced.
Being neutral in the beginning was amazing. And then him choosing sides at the end was a
Those decrypted drives aren't just files, they are dynamite. Investigators who once thought the data was locked away forever are now calling it a gold mine. What they've uncovered paints a tangled picture of back-channel payments, encrypted emails, and shadowy communications that place Snoop squarely inside Diddy's orbit during the critical lead-up to Shakur's murder. None of it looks accidental. These files weren't sitting on a hard drive by chance. They were buried, layered with encryption, as though someone knew the truth could one day rip apart reputations and rewrite hip-hop history. And at the center of it all, say multiple insiders, is evidence positioning Snoop not as a bystander, but as Diddy's right hand when the scheme was set in motion. For fans, it's almost unthinkable. The Dogfather, who spent years recasting himself as hip-hop's friendly uncle, the jokester at football games, the culinary sidekick to Martha Stewart, the suburban granddad who made weed memes mainstream, now finds his legacy colliding with allegations darker than anyone imagined. The betrayal feels seismic. Could Snoop's charisma and humor have been a mask hiding something far more sinister? With the FBI reportedly preparing warrants to raid his own properties, speculation is spiraling. Some whisper he's already making contingency plans, as the threat of federal charges looms. This isn't just about headlines or a career in jeopardy, it's about handcuffs, courtroom reckonings, and the unraveling of decades of loyalty in West Coast rap. Industry insiders are scrambling, texting one another in disbelief. The question now isn't whether the mask will slip, it's how much of what we thought we knew about Snoop was a carefully built illusion. Disbelief is rippling through the industry. Former death row affiliates are quietly taking stock, wondering if the West Coast's shining redemption story is about to collapse in flames. Here's where it gets even messier. Whispers suggest that some of the decrypted data ties Snoop directly to conversations with both familiar death row figures and shadowy outsiders linked to Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the same witness whose testimony has already dragged Diddy's name into court records. And yet, that might not even be the most explosive piece of gossip making the rounds in Los Angeles. Behind closed doors, insiders claim Snoop may have quietly cut a deal with federal investigators, trading intel about Suge Knight's alleged role in the Shakur saga in exchange for leniency. Nothing official, of course, but at least 3 industry veterans insist the feds have been circling Snoop for months, desperate for someone willing to finally puncture the wall of silence that's protected death row since the 90s. If that's true, it explains Suge Knight's fury from behind bars. Serving a 28-year sentence for a fatal hit-and-run, Suge has turned every podcast and prison interview into a stage for his vendetta, accusing Snoop of dismantling death row's reputation, spitting on its legacy, and twisting the knife by buying the label outright. When the past gets rewritten, the question isn't just who's guilty, it's who's telling the story, and why. History, it seems, is being rewritten in real time. For those who've tracked hip-hop's tangled rivalries, the bad blood between Suge Knight and Snoop Dogg is nothing new. Their relationship soured decades ago, when Snoop slipped out of death row's grip and Suge landed behind bars. But in recent months, the feud has gone nuclear. From his prison cell, Suge has fired off blistering words aimed squarely at Snoop. "You trying to recreate what I built. But instead of building something legendary, you embarrassed the world with flop after flop. You didn't honor death row, you destroyed it." This isn't just bitterness over record sales or missed business opportunities. For Suge, it's existential. He sees Snoop's rebranding of death row, turning it into a shiny logo for merch and nostalgia, as an attempt to bury the label's blood-soaked history. And if the whispers are true, that Snoop himself had a hand in shaping that dark history, the betrayal cuts even deeper. Among veterans of the West Coast scene, the unease is real. Some feel the very foundation they helped build is on the verge of crumbling. Suge himself put it bluntly, "I am death row. Before it's over, all eyes on me and Pac's legacy will rise again." And then there's the elephant in the room, the alleged back-channel deals between Snoop and federal investigators. Insiders say this isn't just gossip. The timing alone, Snoop's public silence, the sudden legal maneuvering, and Suge's increasingly frantic accusations, has industry veterans convinced something seismic is brewing. One former road manager insists Snoop has been quietly feeding information to the feds for over a year, offering just enough to steer the spotlight away from himself. According to this theory, Snoop saw the walls closing in, and chose to redirect the heat towards Suge, weaponizing decades of beef and underworld lore as bargaining chips. The whispers of betrayal grow louder with every revelation. Suge Knight has been relentless in branding Snoop a traitor, suggesting that his ties to both Diddy and Keefe D run far deeper than anyone on the outside ever imagined. And maybe that explains the razor's edge Snoop is now walking, trapped between the FBI's scrutiny, the ghosts of death row, and a fanbase beginning to question whether the smile behind Doggystyle was masking something darker all along. But the story doesn't end with encrypted drives and federal wiretaps. The shadow of trust stretches back nearly 3 decades, to the unraveling of Snoop's friendship with Tupac Shakur. For a time, they were inseparable, recording hits, tearing up stages, and standing shoulder to shoulder against mutual enemies. Then, in the weeks before Shakur's murder, everything shifted. The spark came during a now infamous radio interview where Snoop publicly voiced support for East Coast rivals Diddy and Biggie. For Pac, it was the ultimate betrayal. Suge Knight later recounted how Shakur stormed into a hotel room, raging at Snoop's apparent disloyalty. From that moment, the bond was broken. Snoop himself admitted he was shaken, so much so that he carried knives onto a private jet, fearing retaliation from Pac and death row's inner circle. By the night of the Vegas shooting, the friendship was over. Pac refused even to let Snoop ride with him to the fight, shutting him out completely. Their final exchange, according to 2 insiders, was cold and dismissive. For fans who grew up on their collaborations, the fracture felt almost scripted by fate, 2 brothers in arms splintering just before tragedy struck. And for death row, Snoop's pivot wasn't just disloyalty. It was treason. The past refuses to stay buried, and as Snoop Dogg's carefully crafted image comes under fire, old scars are splitting open. From his prison cell, Suge Knight has unleashed a new barrage of accusations, claiming Snoop was never as loyal to Tupac or death row as he portrayed. In recent interviews, Suge has even alleged that Snoop tried to orchestrate bail for Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the lone man currently facing charges in the Shakur case, suggesting Snoop's motives were less about mercy and more about silencing someone who knows too much. "Since I been in here," Suge told The Art of Dialogue, "Snoop and others been trying to bail Keefe D out, because he talking too much." The insinuation is clear. Snoop has everything to lose if Davis keeps talking. Suge has pushed the knife deeper still, alleging that Snoop once boasted to Ray J about paying to have Shakur handled. Ray J hasn't confirmed the story, but that hasn't stopped it from spreading like wildfire in industry group chats. In this fog of suspicion, rumor and revelation bleed together, leaving fans and insiders alike questioning what's real. Meanwhile, Diddy is already drowning in indictments, racketeering, exploitation, and a laundry list of charges that read more like a streaming documentary script than a courtroom docket. Each new court filing is treated like a treasure map by internet sleuths, dissected for any shred of evidence connecting the dots between Diddy, death row, and now, Snoop Dogg. The Diddy-Shakur animosity is no secret. Prosecutors argue it reached a breaking point in the summer of '96. Allegations in sealed interviews and legal documents suggest Diddy even promised millions to anyone who could remove both Shakur and Suge Knight from the board entirely. The man backing up those claims? None other than Keefe D himself, whose recorded statements place Diddy, Snoop, and a web of shadowy associates, all just a few phone calls apart in the tense days leading up to Tupac's murder. For once, the FBI isn't waving these claims away. With decrypted files inching closer to daylight, the sense of dread is growing. In a scandal this tangled, no legacy is untouchable, and no reputation feels safe. Pac, no doubt, would have relished the chance to settle scores in the ring, raise money for the hood, trade punches instead of bullets. But fans today are staring down something far more devastating than a boxing match. This isn't a chart rivalry, a petty feud, or a spat over streaming numbers. If the allegations prove true, if Snoop Dogg, the poster child of California cool, is entangled in a criminal conspiracy tied to one of hip-hop's darkest tragedies, the betrayal will sting deeper than any East Coast, West Coast diss ever did. As one stunned fan posted online, "I don't even know who to trust anymore. If the Dogfather's gone, what's left?" And the questions keep multiplying. Was Snoop's pivot to children's books, cooking shows, and nostalgia albums a genuine reinvention? Or was it camouflage, a calculated retreat, designed to shield him from a storm he knew was on the horizon? The industry is abuzz. The fans are restless. And in the middle of it all, Snoop himself is silent, watching the headlines pile up, waiting for the FBI's knock on the door. There's an uncanny sense of déjà vu here. Every time the Shakur case inches toward resolution, fresh names, new files, and shocking betrayals erupt from the shadows. But this time feels different. With federal agents cracking open encrypted drives and Snoop Dogg's name surfacing in places no one ever expected, the stakes have never been higher. The hip-hop world is holding its breath, waiting to see who falls next. The world of hip-hop waits for the next shoe to drop. Each leaked document, each podcast soundbite, each nervous denial from Snoop's circle only fuels the fire. The questions swirling around a man once thought untouchable are multiplying faster than answers can keep up. And yet, through all the noise, it's Tupac's ghost that refuses to let go. Every headline, every revelation circles back to the fractured brotherhood between him and Snoop, a friendship once unshakable, now scrutinized for warning signs most of us missed. In the mid-90s, they were the face of death row's dominance, two of the most magnetic voices set to carry West Coast rap into a new era. But those final months told a different story. When Snoop went on air and offered public support to Biggie and Diddy, the fallout was immediate. Shakur's rage was legendary, storming into hotel rooms, cutting Snoop out of his orbit, refusing to even share a ride to the Vegas fight. For decades, this was chalked up to bruised egos and fractured pride. But now, with the FBI combing through decrypted files and pulling at digital threads that stretch across coasts and decades, the narrative feels heavier. Fans are beginning to wonder, did Pac's fury stem from more than disloyalty? Did he sense a betrayal deeper than the public ever knew? What once sounded like wild speculation, questions whispered in barbershops and forums, is starting to feel chillingly plausible. Maybe the biggest clues weren't hidden at all. Maybe they were right there, in plain sight, waiting for someone to connect the dots. Industry insiders are murmuring about a bombshell hiding in the decrypted files. Tupac Shakur's name appears far more often than anyone expected. One veteran close to the case claims the discs seized from Diddy's residence include records of heated disputes, arguments over money and loyalty between Shakur and Snoop Dogg, conversations that unfolded just weeks before that fateful night in Vegas. The pattern is striking. After Snoop's controversial radio interview praising Biggie and Diddy, his distance from Pac grew impossible to ignore. He dodged flights, made excuses, and sidestepped face-to-face meetings. Behind closed doors, Pac reportedly began to question Snoop's allegiance. Two sources tied to the old death row camp even insist that Shakur's crew intercepted messages suggesting Snoop was in touch with members of the rival camp, a revelation that fueled suspicions and fractured their bond beyond repair. If true, it reframes the drama of the 90s. The disses, the threats, the storm of backroom tension. Maybe they weren't just theatrics, but the warning signs of a betrayal Pac was beginning to sense. Signs that someone close to him might have been moving in the shadows. And then comes the paper trail. The decrypted drives didn't just yield names, they exposed a financial network that cuts through the fog of myth and rumor. According to insiders, investigators have uncovered wire transfers and receipts routed through shell companies and intermediaries in the days leading up to Shakur's death. Large sums flowed out of Diddy's accounts toward a patchwork of contractors and consultants with one common thread: their proximity to the East Coast-West Coast conflict. For decades, detectives chased whispers. Now, for the first time, there's hard data. A digital breadcrumb trail, cold, undeniable numbers, that may finally bring clarity to hip-hop's most infamous mystery. Some believe the answers buried in these files could finally unravel questions that have haunted hip-hop since the 90s. For Diddy, the money trail is damning enough. 3 law firms on retainer, millions flowing out every month with little clarity on where it all goes. But where things get truly explosive is with Snoop Dogg. According to multiple sources, the FBI has uncovered transaction records tying Snoop directly to the very same shell companies Diddy used to move funds. These aren't routine expenses for tours or studio sessions. They are flagged as consulting fees paid to entities with no visible business presence, entities that investigators now say are connected to known associates of the Southside Crips, the gang Dwayne Keefe D. Davis identified as central players in Tupac's Vegas shooting. What were these payments really for? Hush money? Quiet coordination? Or something bolder, an outright attempt to buy loyalty, silence, or even action as tensions spiraled out of control? Prosecutors are treating them as critical evidence, especially given the timing. Disbursements made days, sometimes mere hours, before pivotal flashpoints in the feud. And the fallout goes far beyond the courtroom. Every leaked detail, every whispered revelation hits fans like a body blow. For those who grew up idolizing Snoop as the cool-headed dogfather of Long Beach, the cracks in his legacy are painful to confront. Even his most loyal supporters are being forced to reconsider the story they've always believed, that Snoop left death row simply to survive, to escape Suge and Shakur's chaos. What if that was only half the truth? What if the rest was deliberately buried, hidden behind encrypted drives and disguised as business transactions? If the FBI paper trail ties Snoop and Diddy together, then the hip-hop feud that shaped an era may not have been chaos at all. It may have been choreography, directed, funded, and executed from the shadows by the very icons fans thought were just trying to survive it. The spotlight on Snoop and Shakur's fractured friendship is intensifying, and the industry is bracing for shockwaves. As the FBI digs deeper, the ripple effects extend far beyond Long Beach. Diddy, Suge Knight, and other power players are suddenly examining old alliances, wary that the fallout could reach them next. Former friends are staying quiet, and the corridors of influence from coast to coast are buzzing with unease. Suge, never one to stay silent, is taking the opportunity to air grievances. He hasn't held back on calling out even Dr. Dre and Jay-Z, questioning why they've stayed quiet while the truth allegedly surfaces. In Calabasas, Malibu, and Beverly Hills, the possibility of federal knockings has the industry's veterans combing through contact lists, anxious about what's coming. At the heart of this tension is Snoop Dogg himself. If the evidence shows he was complicit, directly or by failing to act, his decades-long image as the laid-back king of West Coast charisma could collapse. A generation raised on gin and juice and halftime Super Bowl swagger may soon watch their hero fall from grace in real time. Fans already speculating online. Was Snoop's pivot to family-friendly programming and children's books a genuine reinvention, or a strategic retreat from a storm he helped create? Every move, every public persona now carries new weight, as the FBI edges closer to uncovering the story behind the story. For those who remember the playful, experimental energy of early Snoop, the class clown who never feared going out on a limb, this moment is a stark contrast. What was once carefree creativity now intersects with questions of loyalty, betrayal, and long-hidden truths that may finally see the light. And if you listen closely, the whispers from Snoop's camp are anything but reassuring. Legal sources report that he's been reaching out to international contacts, while security around his private estates has quietly, but noticeably, been ramped up. Rumors are circulating, unconfirmed but persistent, that a private jet may be on standby for a sudden departure to an unknown destination. If true, it hardly suggests a man without secrets. Meanwhile, the FBI is not pausing. Each new warrant, each digital breadcrumb pulled from Diddy's encrypted drives sends a clear message. No one, no matter how beloved, stands above the law. Gone is the playful energy of tracks like Ain't No Fun. What was once light-hearted studio experimentation has been replaced by a storm that could engulf an entire legacy. Could decades of music, business ventures, and cultural influence vanish under the weight of a single federal indictment? Will the FBI finally unearth the smoking gun that closes hip-hop's most infamous cold case? Or is the story we've believed for years, the one the industry carefully sold, simply an illusion? Now, the question is in the hands of fans. Is the Dogfather merely a fall guy in a decades-old conspiracy? Or have we been celebrating a wolf in sheep's clothing all along? The speculation is electric. Are you still riding with Snoop, or has the era of blind faith come to an end? An era? Perhaps. But one thing is certain, This is a headline that won't fade quietly. In hip-hop, the only constant is that the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how long it's been buried. So stay alert. Keep your eyes open, because the next bombshell could drop at any moment, and when it does, it will shake the culture to its core.